Um, I'm the kind of, I suppose, the kind of bit of chocolate in the middle of this afternoon's agenda. I'm afraid I haven't brought any goo with me, which might be a major disappointment to you, but I actually sold the business 5 years ago. So I need to be straight with you. I've got no goo, but I'm going to talk about how I built up the company, and hopefully there will be some interesting insights for you. I sometimes think that I'm responsible for expanding the nation's waistline. I mean, I certainly did that. I once calculated that I added about 200 million calories a week to the nation's diet. And to be fair, I ate quite a few of them myself. I know I look quite a svelte guy, but actually I used to eat a lot of chocolate puddings. I've come off my sugar addiction over the last 5 years. I started Goo in 2003, and I built it up over 6 years into a $50 million business, selling chocolate puddings all over the world. A lot of people ask me, why did I sell this business? You know, it's tasty, it's good, people like it. For sure I sold it for, we got a good price for it. And I must admit it was my cholesterol levels when I sold the business, I think were at just under 7. So I needed to sell it for my own welfare. Anyway, I'll talk to you a little bit about the genesis of the business. Presumably, most people around the room have heard of Goo and have tasted Goo. It's very delicious, very chocolatey, indulgent desserts. Before Goo, I was sent out to Belgium. My last company was called St Ivel, and I was sent on a mission to launch Utterly Butterly in Belgium. Don't know if you've heard of Utterly Butterly. It's a boring brand of margarine. And in fact, margarine is a product that I've yet to meet anybody who's interested in it. It has zero consumer appeal. And I was really struggling with this. And I used to go and hang out in this patisserie in Belgium, in Brussels. And I just started looking at these kind of chocolate brownies and chocolate mousses and all this kind of lovely patisserie and the smells. And I just thought, you know what, if I could wrap this up into a brand, that would be that's a good business. And it's certainly a lot more fun than selling margarine. So that was actually the genesis of Goo, when I kind of had this experience, this kind of eureka moment. I say that, I didn't kind of take all my clothes off and dance naked in the street. I did absolutely nothing with it. I did nothing with it for about 2 years, apart from bore people about this business idea that I'd had. And whenever I meet people, I'm sure lots of people in the audience are the same, kind of sitting on these ideas that you do absolutely nothing with. I don't know if anybody can relate to that. Anyway, I sat on this idea for 2 years, did absolutely nothing with it. Everybody thought it was quite a good idea, but it's like, stop boring us, Jim. And the moment I actually did something with it, I remember I was skiing with my brother and some of my brother's successful friends. And one of them asked me what I did for a living. And I couldn't quite say I sell margarine. So I said, well, I've got a chocolate puddings brand. And he said, oh, that sounds interesting. You know, tell me about it. And I said, well, I make these fantastic soufflés and mousses and brownies and so on. He said, well, where can you buy it? I said, well, I'm just about to launch, so you can't buy it anywhere, Tony. Anyway, at the end of this chairlift ride, I suddenly thought, I've got to do it now. I can't keep on bullshitting about this idea I had. So I finally resolved to launch my dream idea. This was back in 2003, and that was the first product I developed, which is a melting middle. It's bloody good, actually. It smells good, tastes good, it fills your, the good thing about chocolate is that it melts at blood temperature. Cocoa butter melts at blood temperature. So you stick it in your mouth and you start getting this kind of, serotonins in your brain start going crazy with good chocolate. Anyway, I started playing around in the kitchen, developed that product for one. And then I met my business partner, who is the most unlikely business partner you could imagine. There's a guy called Motti, who is a Hasidic Jew, and he has actually got 15 children, funnily enough, from the same wife, which is quite a, he's a bull, this guy. He had a factory up in Stamford Hill, and we basically started playing around with chocolate puddings. This was back in 2003. So the first product we developed was our chocolate souffle. Just as a matter of interest, there's enough people in this room. Does anybody know how to make chocolate souffle? Hands up. Couple in the front. That was only halfway up. Okay, yeah. That was, chocolate souffle is quite difficult to make, actually. It's not easy. The thing about chocolate souffle is keeping the air in the product, because there's nothing worse than a kind of sunken souffle. This product was, I've got to say, particularly good, and I'll just talk you through it, because it's actually the reason why my company was successful. You basically you stick it in the oven in these glass ramekins, and you get this chocolate crust on top, and then you kind of crack through the chocolate crust, and you get this lovely pool of chocolate lava underneath that completely kind of coats your mouth and gets into your subconscious. And it's delicious. It's very, very good indeed. And that was our first product, which I believe is why the business went from strength to strength. I didn't know actually how to make this product until the day I launched it. I know that sounds a bit crazy. I had it listed at Sainsbury and Waitrose, and I'd sold it into them, but I just couldn't work out how to make it because it kept on sinking. And I finally discovered this special powder, which I call the edible widget, which basically whipped air into the product. It was a bit like the Boddington's widget in those cans. And that saved me, so actually it was all fine. But whenever I talk to people about, who've started a business, it's incredible how chaotic small businesses and startup businesses are. I know you've just heard from, the chairman of one of the largest businesses in the UK, and I suspect he doesn't have to worry about this kind of stuff because he's got millions of people who worry about it for him. But I can tell you, my business was built on string, which I suspect a lot of small businesses are. And I finally worked out how to make it just the day I launched. So we have a good product. At the heart of the business, we have a fantastic product. And but I knew, of course, I needed something more than that. I needed a brand. And I went to see a company in Chelsea called Big Fish. And I took this souffle and I said, look, I need a brand for this. And the guy ate about 3 during the meeting. He obviously liked it. And he said, come back in a couple of weeks. And he phoned me back a week later and said, Jim, you've got to come in. And he said, I found this brand in Scandinavia, in Sweden. I found this brand called Goo, and this is it. He showed me this pack. And he said, yeah, he said, the weird thing is, Jim, they're doing exactly the same as you've been talking about. They're even doing a chocolate souffle. Here it is. And I looked at this and I thought, God, that's brilliant. I love it. You know, it's so simple. It's just got that kind of chic kind of class about it. And I love those 2 dots, which is like a smiley face, but it looks kind of foreign and classy and stuff. And then I thought, oh, someone's beaten me to it. You know, it's like, bugger. Someone's beaten me to it. I'm sure everybody's had that experience before. But it was like, Anyway, he could see these kind of emotions going through my face. And then he started smiling and said, Jim, this brand doesn't exist. It's all yours. This is your brand. I'm bullshitting about the Swedish Scandinavian story. It is your brand. So that's how Goo was created as a brand. It was a fairly random, haphazard bit of creativity, literally done within a week. And just talking to this guy, he's a very clever, creative bloke. He said, well, yeah, I was thinking of calling it Gout, G-O-U-T, which is the French for taste. But he then said, but of course the English would pronounce that gout. And gout isn't a good brand name. So he then created this thing. So I then had the brand. I had a product that I was very proud of. And what I then did, and again, the guy on the platform before me would probably have a heart attack, but I did some consumer research. I didn't use anybody like WPP. I used my own wits. I basically took some empty packs of Goo, some empty boxes, into a Waitrose store on the King's Road in London. And I just figured that basically if this brand was going to work, it had to do the work for me. I think it's called packvertising. So in other words, the pack does the selling. So I created a bit of a gap on the shelves, and I gave myself 10 minutes for someone to pick it up, because I thought if someone picks it up in 10 minutes on the King's Road in Chelsea, that's what needs to happen for this brand to work. And literally 5 minutes later, this woman came along. I could see her studying my mock-ups, and sure enough, she picked it up and put it in her basket. And I then went up to her and I said, I'm sorry, madam, there's nothing in there, but thank you very much. That's all the research I need. I'm going to start a business on the back of it. And that's what I did. And she looked at me as if I was some kind of weirdo. I then ran out of the store, and that's a true story. I promise it has happened. So I then launched it. I launched Goo souffles in the hottest summer that we've had in 100 years, which was back in 2003. And I couldn't sell the stuff for love nor money. It was like a disaster. It was one of the worst launches on record. I remember the buyer from Waitrose phoning me and saying, we're throwing half of them away. It's not going to work, Jim. And in that slightly kind of nasty, told you so kind of way, he said, well done, you've tried your best, but, you know, that's it. And I basically said to him, look, whatever his name was, I can't remember, bastard. I said, look, just bear with us, because this weather isn't going to last. And sure enough, he did, to be fair to him, he did. And come September, Goo started selling. Didn't just start selling, it started selling amazingly well. And literally, about 2 weeks into September, I got a call from this guy, and he said, Jim, this is crazy. It's going, we love it. Can you send some more products in? You know, our team love it. How, you know, when can you launch new products? All this stuff. Now, one of the lessons I learned early in my business career is never slag off your customers. So, you know, I love all my customers dearly. Tesco, love them. Sainsbury, beautiful, fantastic. You know, they basically, you live and die with these guys. But I have to say it, as a startup business, you live very vicariously with the food retailers in this country. Luckily, the product started selling, and it just basically scaled and scaled and scaled. And from a marketing point of view, what was interesting was that the best advert that we had was our product and our pack. And what I mean by that is that when there was a kind of wall of goo in a store, it created this lovely kind of look that kind of stuck out from the shelves, and people noticed. It's like it really had that standout. And whenever I tried to do anything marketing, so whenever I tried to do a TV advert, it was always a complete disaster. So all of the old kind of post-industrial ways of marketing, which is basically TV advert, building displays, so on and so forth, none of those ways worked. Basically, what worked was having a great product in the right place and people trying it, liking it, talking about it, and then spreading the word. So I suppose, and I think that's how launches go these days. I think it's basically good news. I think there's a very simple theory, which is that good news travels quickly. And when you see something you like, and of course it's much easier in this day and age because everybody just tweets about it or Instagrams it or whatever. We didn't have that in 2003. But it basically spread by word of mouth, which was great for me because word of mouth is actually quite a cheap way of advertising, and TV advertising is bloody expensive. So the business grew and grew, and we started launching lots of new stuff, brownies, carrot cakes, and then I did a Virgin deal, and the business really took off. This was quite simple. Basically, Virgin have 2 million people flying to America and the Caribbean every year, and basically they are captors, they are prisoners, as all airline passengers are. They're prisoners on the plane, and we supplied the pudding. So if any of you flew Virgin in the last, I don't know, for the last 10 years, you'll have been given a small goo. And the way it works on a plane is that you get locked in. You are literally a prisoner. And so you get to look at whatever's in front of you. And most people are pretty bored 2 hours into a flight. So somehow this worked brilliantly. It was kind of some kind of subliminal effect on the subconscious that people associated goo with holidays and fun and so on. And the other thing about it is that food, the reason why airline food doesn't taste good is very simple, that at 35,000 feet your taste buds are completely knackered. No food tastes good apart from chocolate. So if you want to enjoy food at 30,000 feet, eat chocolate. Anything else will taste quite bland. So people came off these flights, came back to England, and actually still remembered about goo, and then they kind of saw it in the supermarket and thought, oh, that tasted good. That was the best bit of advertising we did. and I even made money out of it. So it didn't cost me a big. And as I say, we then hired various agencies. Mother, for one of them, who charged me, I don't know, £500,000 to make a fancy ad in Cape Town, which was great fun, I've got to say. Cape Town's a great place. But it did absolutely zip all for our rates of sale. The best thing was basically getting the product out there to the right people and getting them to try it, which is what I did. So, business grew and I sold it 5 years ago for a fair amount of money, and I'm no longer involved in it, which was quite sad actually in some ways. I've got over it now. But I think I kind of feel that the chocolate and anything sugary has now turned into the next cocaine, the next tobacco. And there's a serious kind of backlash going on at the moment about sugar in the diet. You know, we are actually at the early stages of a major diabetes epidemic. And frankly, I didn't want to be associated with it for obvious reasons. So I sold Goo back in 2010, and I decided to enjoy life for a couple of years, and then I basically got bored of getting up at 10 o'clock, going to the gym, meeting people for lunch. It's like, what do you do in the afternoon? You went on a few fancy holidays. Trouble is that most people work. I mean, that's the reality. So when you're I'm in my mid-40s, so it's like, oh, I've got to do something. So frankly, I mean, I enjoyed doing nothing for a bit, but I got bored of it. And then I was thinking, what am I going to do next? So I discovered the loveliness of coconuts. And in fact, if you had lunch here, you might have tried one of our products. We're now called the Coconut Collaborative. It's got nothing to do with Goo. And basically, in each pot, there's a whole coconut in there. So, and we make yogurt basically out of coconut milk. Coconut's incredibly good for you. It's good for your digestion. It's good for your skin. It's even good for your performance, your memory. And it's interesting that sports stars these days have gone non-dairy, because it's been proven that dairy actually tires you out, it knackers you, you don't perform as well. You may know that Italians don't drink cappuccino after 12 o'clock, it affects their performance later on. And anyway, I'm totally convinced by the power of coconuts. So what I've now done is started all over again. So I launched it in Itsu and Waitrose and Ocado, and we're gradually building up a following, and hopefully it will be the next big thing, but it's still very early days. But anyway, thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it. Don't know if anybody's got any questions, but very happy to field them.
Geoff Hamilton-Dick from Jump. I was just wondering, with this new brand, are you trying to leverage mobile and internet and desktop more than you were certainly when you did Goo?
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing is this is much more targetable. So the my sweet spot consumer is basically a yoga-loving yummy mum, essentially, and they're quite targetable. They're very vocal on social media, so we're doing much more of that than I ever did at Goo.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, James.
Going on. Thank you.